Subscribe to the channel and hear even more exciting stories. My fiance's family demanded a virginity test. Here's how I responded. Hey Reddit, I never thought I'd be that girl posting her drama for strangers to dissect, but here we are. Call me Lila, 28F. For a while, my life looked like one of those annoying engagement announcement posts. Me and Tom, 30M, together for 3 years, recently engaged, smiling through our brunches and travel pics, everyone predicting our perfect forever. Tom's the quiet, thoughtful type, an engineer with a surprising knack for dumb puns. He makes me laugh, never forgets my coffee order, and somehow remembers to text my mom on her birthday. I know, keep him, right? Except, there's the family. I met them about a year into our relationship, and at first, I chalked up the weirdness to culture clash. Tom's family is traditional. Think lots of emphasis on honor, appearances, and not rocking the boat. They're polite, sure, but there's an edge. Tom's mom, Mrs. B, has that bless your heart smile that says she's judging your shoes and your life choices in one glance. His dad is quieter, but whenever I try to make conversation, he just asks about my job, stable, or my plans for children, soon, I hope. I told myself they'd warm up. Honestly, I ignored the little comments. The way Mrs. B would call Tom her good boy, or make offhand remarks about the importance of family values. There was that time Tom's sister pointedly asked if I'd ever lived with a boyfriend before, right in front of the whole table. Tom looked mortified. I laughed it off. Looking back, maybe I should have asked more questions. But until last week, I thought we'd weathered the awkwardness. Our wedding was a few months out, plans underway, and Tom and I were, mostly, on the same page about everything. If there were red flags, they were muted, background noise to the main event. Two people in love, about to start their lives together. And then came the conversation that made me question everything. It started innocently enough. A Sunday dinner at Tom's parents' house. The kind where you're not sure if you should bring wine or just your thickest skin. We'd finished dessert, and everyone was lingering in that too formal way when Mrs. B cleared her throat with authority. Lila, dear, could we have a word in private? My heart dropped. Tom squeezed my hand under the table, a silent good luck. Mrs. B led me to the sitting room, where Tom's aunt and older sister were already perched on the edge of a brocaded sofa, faces solemn. I thought I'd walked into a weird intervention. I forced a smile, waiting for someone to announce a surprise bridal shower. Instead, Mrs. B fixed me with her prim little smile and said, "There's something important we need to discuss before you join our family." I honestly thought she was going to hand me a family recipe or give a speech about marital harmony. What I did not expect was this. We'd like you to take a test. For purity. Before the wedding. It's a tradition in our family. The room spun. For a second, I thought maybe I'd misunderstood. A test for? I said, my voice cracking. Tom's sister helpfully chimed in. A virginity test. It's for your own good. Really, so there are no doubts. I stared at them, waiting for the punchline. Nope. Dead serious. I felt like the floor had opened up beneath me. Is this some kind of joke? I asked, but Mrs. B shook her head. Not at all. It's a matter of trust and respect for our son. We need to know you're pure. 1,000 responses ping-ponged in my brain. I managed to mumble. That's incredibly invasive. But Mrs. B just gave that steely, practiced smile and said, it's tradition. We expect you to honor it. When I left the room, Tom saw my face and immediately knew something was wrong. I was shaking. On the drive home, I told him everything. I half expected him to laugh it off, tell me his family had lost their minds. But Tom just sat there, white-knuckled, silent. I realized this wasn't just their issue. It was about to become ours. The car ride home was so quiet you could have heard my brain melting. I waited for Tom to break the silence, to call his family out as completely out of line. Instead, he just kept gripping the steering wheel, jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping. Finally, I blurted, tell me you think this is insane. Tom sighed, didn't meet my eyes, and said, I know it's weird, but it's important to them. Maybe just do it so we can move on. That's when the betrayal started to seep in, not just from his family, but from him. Wasn't I supposed to be his priority? I asked, would you take a purity test for me if my family demanded it? He looked stricken, like he hadn't thought that far. You know I trust you, Lila, but this is about their peace of mind. Can't we just get through this? I felt cornered. Get through this sounded a lot like just give in so everyone else is happy. I called my best friend the minute I got home. She lost it, full outrage mode. If you say yes to this, what's next? Chaperone bathroom breaks. She was right. But then Tom's text started. My mom says if you really love me, you'll respect our traditions. And then his sister DM'd me a long, preachy essay about how important trust and purity are in their culture. Suddenly, my inbox was a battleground. My own family was stunned when I told them. My mom wanted to call Tom's mother and give her a piece of her mind. Dad just said, "This is not a thing in 2025. You're not livestock." Their anger made me feel better and worse. Better, because I wasn't crazy. Worse, because it meant this wasn't going to just disappear. I tried to talk to Tom again, hoping he'd realize how humiliating and controlling this was. But he kept retreating behind. It's only a test, Lila. We'll be married after, and it'll all be behind us. Every conversation left me feeling more alone, less heard. It wasn't just about the test anymore. It was about whose side Tom was really on, and if I was about to marry into a family who'd never truly accept me unless I proved myself on their terms. It all came to a head the next weekend, when Tom's family invited us over to talk things through. I didn't want to go, but Tom begged. Just hear them out. Maybe we can find a middle ground. I knew there was no middle ground on bodily autonomy, but I agreed, mostly to prove to myself, and Tom, that I wasn't the irrational one here. The minute we walked in, Mrs. B went full courtroom drama. Lila, we're disappointed in your reaction. This tradition is a sign of respect for our son and our family. Tom's dad nodded, solemn, like they were asking me to recite wedding vows, not submit to a humiliating test. Tom hovered awkwardly, avoiding my eyes. I tried to stay calm. I'm not an object for inspection, I said. I love Tom, but I will not be shamed or tested for your approval. That's not respect. That's control. Tom's sister jumped in, insisting she'd done it, and it was no big deal. I almost laughed. Was this supposed to make it better? If anything, it made me sadder. Tom looked torn. Lila, it's just a formality. Please, can't you do this one thing? That's when I snapped. No, Tom. Wanting to marry someone means standing up for them, not letting your family treat them like a used car at an auction. If you can't see how wrong this is, maybe you're not ready for marriage, either. The silence that followed was deafening. Mrs. B looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Tom's dad muttered about young people and their selfishness. For the first time, I didn't try to smooth it over. I just stood up and walked out. That night, Tom and I had it out. He finally admitted he was scared to disappoint his parents, but couldn't promise he'd take my side if it came down to them or me. I realized I was fighting for more than my dignity. I was fighting for a partner who'd put our relationship above toxic traditions. And I was starting to see just how alone I was in that fight. The days after that showdown were a blur of emotions. Shock, humiliation, then pure, hot rage. I alternated between feeling small and exposed, and wanting to burn Tom's entire family group chat to the ground. I'd always considered myself pretty tough, but nothing prepared me for the feeling of being weighed and measured like I was some ancient prize at a purity auction. My head replayed the confrontation on a loop. Tom's silence, Mrs. B's cold disappointment, the way everyone looked at me as if I was the unreasonable one. For a while, I even doubted myself. Was I making this a bigger deal than it was? Was I letting my Western values cloud what could just be a harmless family tradition? But then I'd remember the look in Tom's eyes, part pleading, part resigned, and it broke my heart all over again. It wasn't just about the test. It was about whether my future husband had my back when it counted. My phone kept lighting up with messages. Tom's family alternated between guilt-tripping and outright insults. You're blowing this out of proportion. Don't you want to prove you're trustworthy? My own friends tried to rally me, sending memes, offering to egg Tom's parents' house, but nothing really took the sting away. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake beside Tom, who barely touched me now, feeling the chasm growing wider between us. I wanted him to fight for me, just once, to say out loud that he chose us over outdated shame. Instead, he whispered, I wish you could just do it for me. I realized he didn't want a wife, he wanted a peacekeeper. Slowly, anger began to harden into clarity. If this was my welcome to the family, What else would they demand for tradition's sake? And if Tom wouldn't defend me on something so deeply personal, would he ever? One by one, the rose-colored illusions dropped away, and I saw my relationship, not as I wished it was, but as it really was. By the end of the week, my mind felt like a war zone. Half of me clinging to the version of Tom I'd loved, the guy who made bad puns and remembered my coffee order, the other half wondering how I could have missed all these signs. Our apartment was tense and silent. Tom kept trying to talk, but what he really wanted was for me to fold, to make things easier so we could get back to wedding planning. One night, he came home with flowers and a stilted apology. "I'm sorry this got so out of hand," he said, but his eyes told a different story. He was tired, not sorry. "Can't we just compromise?" he asked. "Just get it over with, for the sake of peace?" I stared at him and realized the choice I was making wasn't about the test anymore. It was about what I was willing to accept for the rest of my life. I thought about what our marriage would look like. Would I always be the one to bend? Would every argument come down to me making sacrifices while he played mediator between me and his family? I took off my engagement ring and placed it on the table. "No," I said quietly, "I can't do this, Tom. Not just the test, this whole dynamic. I need a partner who stands with me, not behind me. If you can't see why this is wrong, if you can't stand up for me now, when will you ever?" His face crumpled. "You're ending things over this?" he asked, voice shaky. But I knew it wasn't just this. It was everything it represented. "I'm ending things because I won't start my marriage with shame and compliance. I deserve better, and honestly, so do you." That night, I packed a bag and went to my sister's. I cried, shook, and doubted myself 100 times. But beneath the heartbreak was a stubborn relief, a voice that said, "Finally, you chose yourself." The wedding was off, and for the first time in weeks, I slept without dread curling in my gut. The fallout wasn't pretty. The next morning, my phone blew up with a flurry of notifications. Missed calls from Tom, a dozen messages from his mother, and even a sanctimonious text from his aunt. "Marriage means sacrifice, Lila. I hope you find humility someday." Tom's sister left a voicemail, her voice trembling with righteous fury, accusing me of breaking Tom's heart for no reason and spitting on our family's values. I didn't respond to any of it. I was too drained, still raw from making the hardest decision of my life. Word spread quickly among our friends. Some reached out with messages of support. "You did the right thing. Don't ever let anyone make you feel less." While others were more cautious, as if divorce was contagious. There were awkward silences at work, sympathetic glances in the hallway, and one mutual friend who actually said, "Couldn't you have just taken the test and gotten it over with?" That one stung, but it also made my decision feel even more necessary. Tom, to his credit, called once more. He sounded tired, broken. "I never wanted it to come to this," he said. "I love you, but I have to think about my family, too." I realized then that for Tom, love meant peace at any price, even if that price was my dignity. My own family closed ranks around me. My sister brought over ice cream and bad movies. My mom threatened to have words with Mrs. B at the next supermarket encounter. Their support was a balm, but the loss still ached. 3 years of shared dreams, plans for a future, gone in a week. But mixed with the grief was a strange, liberating clarity. I'd always wondered if I'd have the strength to walk away if someone crossed a line I couldn't accept. Now I knew. I'd lost my fiancé, but I'd kept my self-respect. And, slowly, that felt less like failure and more like a hard-won victory. The days after the breakup were a messy mix of relief, grief, and deep self-examination. At first, it was just survival. Waking up, making coffee, replaying every moment, every argument, wondering what I could have said to change Tom's mind. But as the initial storm passed, I started to see things I hadn't wanted to admit before. I realized how much I'd twisted myself to fit into his family's expectations, how often I'd swallowed a comeback, faked a smile, or let a backhanded comment slide for the sake of harmony. I saw, painfully clearly, how easy it is to rationalize little red flags when you want so badly for love to work out. If I hadn't drawn the line at the test, where would I have drawn it? Would I have spent my life apologizing for not measuring up to someone else's standards? My friends' reactions were a mirror. The ones who truly knew me were outraged on my behalf. Others said things like, Maybe you could have met halfway, which only made me double down. I started journaling. Pages of angry letters, heartbreak poems, lists of what I wanted and would never tolerate again. I realized my boundaries weren't just for show. They were a core part of who I was and who I wanted to be. Therapy helped, too. My therapist asked me, "What do you want from a partner beyond love?" It hit me that I wanted respect, trust, and someone who'd fight for me, even when it was hard. Not someone who needed me to keep the peace at my own expense. Slowly, the ache began to fade, replaced by something fiercer, pride. I'd stood up for myself in the face of enormous pressure. I wasn't difficult. I got used to people asking, sometimes in hushed voices, why the wedding was called off. At first, I'd fumble for words. It just didn't work out, or we had some differences. Eventually, though, I started telling the truth. His family wanted me to take a virginity test. I said no. He chose their peace over my dignity. Every time I said it out loud, the story felt less like a shameful secret and more like a badge of survival. I poured myself into work, picked up old hobbies I'd let slide, and spent more time with the people who never asked me to prove my worth. I started running again, not for anyone else, but because it made me feel strong. I reconnected with old friends, allowed myself to flirt and laugh and remember what it felt like to be seen just for being me. The most surprising change was in how I viewed relationships. I stopped romanticizing compromise when it really meant self-erasure. I promised myself that next time, I'd notice the warning signs sooner, the little jokes that cut, the traditions that felt more like control, the partner who looked away when I needed him most. Tom reached out once, months after everything had calmed down. He apologized for not standing up for me, admitted he'd been afraid. I told him, honestly, that I hoped he'd learn to fight for someone he loves, even if it means disappointing his family. We wished each other well and moved on. My family never treated me like I was broken. They reminded me, sometimes loudly, sometimes with just a squeeze of the hand, that choosing my self-respect wasn't selfish. It was necessary. The old wounds faded, replaced by new boundaries, stronger friendships, and a quiet confidence I'd never had before. For the first time in my adult life, I felt whole, and I promised myself I'd never let anyone make me smaller than that again. Looking back, I sometimes wonder how close I came to disappearing into someone else's story. There were so many moments I could have caved, said yes to their tradition, kept the peace, worn my discomfort like an invisible veil. For a long time, I thought real love meant swallowing my pride, proving my worth, making myself easier to keep. Now I know, real love doesn't ask you to pass a test. It stands beside you, even when your voice shakes. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone facing family or cultural pressure in a relationship, it's this. You don't owe anyone proof of your value, your history, or your purity. If someone's love depends on your compliance, that isn't love. And if a partner won't stand up for you when it matters, they're showing you exactly what to expect for the rest of your life. Believe them. It took me losing a future I'd planned for years to see how important my boundaries are. Now, they aren't just lines in the sand. They're stone foundations. I know how to listen to the warning bells in my gut and trust them, even when it's lonely or hard. I'm not a scandal or a cautionary tale. I'm just a woman who decided she deserved more and didn't flinch when the price was steep. So, Reddit, thanks for reading this far. If you're stuck in a mess of someone else's making, if you're doubting, aching, or feeling small, please know you're not alone. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to choose yourself. And sometimes, that's how you end up finding the strength you never knew you had. Here's to new chapters, written on your own terms.